I never thought I'd be the kind of woman standing in her father's doorway drenched from the rain, explaining why I arrived in a taxi instead of the luxury car he gave me 6 months ago. But there I was, water dripping from my coat onto the marble floor of his grand entrance hall, watching my father's face change from warm greeting to confused concern. "Melody, sweetheart," he said, stepping forward to embrace me despite my wet clothes. "Why did you come by taxi? What happened to the Tesla I gave you? Where's little Lily?" "Lily's with Jasmine tonight," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. My mouth opened to explain about the car, but no words came out. How could I tell him? Where would I even start? The past few months had been a blur of excuses, ignored red flags, and the constant juggling act of teaching second grade while trying to keep my marriage together and my career on track. Before I could gather my thoughts, Camden stepped forward from behind me. My husband of 3 years, the man I'd trusted with everything, moved with a confidence that made my stomach turn. He placed his hand on my shoulder in what probably looked like a supportive gesture to my father, but I could feel the warning in his grip. "I gave it to my mother," Camden announced, his voice steady and almost proud. "She needed it more." The silence that followed felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I watched my father's expression shift through several emotions in the span of a heartbeat. Confusion, disbelief, and then something I'd never seen on his face before. His jaw tightened. His eyes, usually so warm when they looked at me, turned cold and sharp as ice. He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. Instead, he walked past both of us without a word, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor as he headed toward his study. I heard the door close with a gentle click that somehow felt more ominous than if he'd slammed it. Through the closed door, I heard him pick up the phone. His voice was muffled, but I caught enough words to make my blood run cold. "Yes, I need to report a stolen vehicle. My daughter's name." Camden's hand fell from my shoulder. "What's he doing?" he whispered, but I couldn't answer. I couldn't move. I just stood there staring at that closed door, wondering how my life had fallen apart so completely, wondering what this would mean for Lily, for my teaching career, for everything I'd worked so hard to build. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how we ended up in that hallway, soaking wet and facing my father's quiet rage, I need to take you back 6 months, back to my birthday when everything still seemed perfect, when I was just another working mom trying to balance teaching, parenting, and marriage, while nurturing dreams of becoming a principal. It was a beautiful spring morning when my father surprised me with the Tesla. I'd been teaching second grade for 8 years, driving the same old Honda Civic I'd bought, used when I graduated college. Between lesson plans, grading papers, chasing after 3-year-old Lily, and studying for my administrative certification, I never had time to think about cars. That wasn't who I was raised to be, complaining about what I didn't have. But my father, Theodore Winters, he always saw things I didn't say out loud. He knew I'd been having trouble with my car, the check engine light that kept coming on, the strange noises it made on cold mornings, the anxiety of breaking down during school pickup and leaving other parents' children stranded. He'd noticed how I'd started leaving earlier and earlier for work, worried about getting stuck on the highway. So when he told me to come outside during my birthday brunch, I expected maybe a cake or a small gathering of relatives. Instead, sitting in his circular driveway wrapped with an enormous red bow was a pristine white Tesla Model S. I actually cried. Real tears of shock and gratitude. "Daddy, this is too much," I kept saying, thinking about my principal application I'd submitted just last week, wondering if I deserved such luxury when I was still just a classroom teacher working towards something bigger. But he just hugged me tight and said, "Nothing is too much for my little girl. You work hard. You're raising Lily beautifully. You're building your career, and you deserve nice things. This car will get you safely to work and back home to your family." Camden was there too, of course. He seemed thrilled, taking pictures of me with the car, posting them on social media with captions about how lucky I was to have such a generous father. He drove it home for us that day since I was too nervous to handle such an expensive vehicle with Lily's car seat to install and transfer. I remember watching him behind the wheel, thinking how handsome he looked, how lucky I was to have a supportive husband and a loving father. Looking back now, I should have noticed things that day. Small things, like how Camden kept running his hands over the steering wheel, checking all the features, asking my father detailed questions about the warranty and insurance policies, or how when my father's sister, Beatrice, arrived late to the party, she pulled me aside and asked, "Where's Camden's mother? Wasn't Dolores invited? I thought she'd want to see your gift." I'd made excuses. She said she was busy with something. You know how she is about family gatherings, always feels out of place around Daddy's money. Beatrice's expression had been skeptical, but she didn't push. She just kissed my cheek and said, "Well, happy birthday, sweetheart. Beautiful car. Make sure you keep all the paperwork in your name. Trust me on this one, as your lawyer aunt." At the time, I'd laughed at her professional paranoia. Now I understood she'd been trying to warn me about something she'd sensed, but couldn't quite articulate. Beatrice had always been good at reading people, at seeing the angles others missed. The first 2 weeks with the Tesla were wonderful. I loved the smooth, quiet drive to school, the way it made me feel confident pulling into the faculty parking lot where other teachers noticed and complimented it. Even the other moms at Lily's daycare pickup seemed impressed, though I tried to downplay it, not wanting to seem like I was showing off my father's generosity. Camden seemed happy for me, always offering to charge it overnight or clean it on weekends. He was good with Lily, helping with her bedtime routine so I could grade papers in the evenings or work on my graduate coursework for my administrative degree. Everything felt normal, stable, like we were building something solid together. Then one afternoon, I came home from a particularly challenging day. Third grader behavior issues, parent conferences to prepare for, and a stack of administrative certification assignments waiting on my kitchen table, to find an unfamiliar car in our driveway, an old beat-up Honda Civic that looked like it had seen better days 20 years ago. "Whose car is this?" I asked Camden, who was in the garage with Lily, trying to assemble a new tricycle while she helped by handing him the wrong screws. He barely looked up from the instruction manual. "Oh, that's temporary. My mom's car broke down again, so I'm letting her borrow one from a guy at work until she figures things out." Something about his tone bothered me, but I couldn't pinpoint what. Maybe it was the way he avoided eye contact, or how quickly he dismissed the topic. "Is she okay? Does she need help paying for repairs? We could loan her some money." Camden's eyes flashed with something, annoyance, defensiveness, before he softened his expression. "She's fine. You know how proud she is. She wouldn't accept money from us anyway. Dolores has always been independent, worked 3 jobs to raise me alone." That night, Dolores called. My mother-in-law had a voice that carried, and our apartment walls were thin. I was in the bedroom, folding Lily's clothes and organizing her school supplies, when I heard her through Camden's phone, loud enough that he might as well have had her on speaker. "Finally, you do something useful for me. That girl's father gives her everything while I struggle with nothing. It's about time you remembered who raised you, who sacrificed everything so you could have a future." I froze, a tiny pink shirt half folded in my hands. The words stung more than they should have. I'd always tried to be kind to Dolores, even when she made little comments about my privileged upbringing or how some people have it easy while she worked so hard. During family dinners, she'd often mention how difficult it was to make ends meet, how she worried about her old car breaking down on the way to work. Camden's response was too quiet for me to hear, but his mother's voice came through again. "I don't care what she thinks. I'm your mother. I come first. That granddaughter of mine deserves to see her. Grandmother driving something decent for once." I pretended to be asleep when Camden came to bed that night. I didn't want to fight, especially not with Lily sleeping in the next room. I told myself I was being oversensitive, that of course his mother was important to him, that helping her with a temporary car situation was a kind thing to do. After all, I had advantages she didn't, a loving father who could help when times were tough. But over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. The Tesla wasn't always in our garage when I got home from work. Camden always had explanations. He'd taken it to get detailed, or he was test driving it to make sure everything ran smoothly, or he'd loaned it to a colleague whose car was in the shop. Each excuse seemed reasonable on its own, but together they started forming a pattern that made me uneasy, especially when other moms at school pickup started asking where my fancy car was. Jennifer, my coworker and fellow second-grade teacher, mentioned seeing a white Tesla at the grocery store near the older part of town, driven by someone who looked like Camden's mother. "I thought it was yours," she'd said casually during lunch. "But then I remembered you mentioning Dolores doesn't usually drive luxury cars." One Friday, I finished my lesson plans early and decided to leave school right after the final bell instead of staying late to work on my administrative coursework like I usually did. I texted Camden that I'd be home early, suggesting we could grab dinner together as a family before tackling the weekend's household chores. He responded immediately, "Stuck in a meeting. Might be late. Order something for yourself and Lily." But something felt wrong. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe I'd just ignored my gut feelings for too long. Instead of going home, I called my best friend Jasmine, another working mom who understood the challenges of balancing career and family. "Jazz, can you pick up Lily from daycare? I need to check something and I don't want to drag her along if it turns out to be nothing." "Everything okay?" Jasmine's voice was concerned. She knew me well enough to hear the stress I was trying to hide. We'd been friends since college, had been each other's support system through marriages, pregnancies, and the daily struggles of working motherhood. "I think so. I hope so. I'll explain later." Then I asked my coworker Jennifer if I could borrow her car, claiming mine was making weird noises, and I wanted to get it checked before driving it over the weekend. I drove to Camden's office and waited, feeling like a character in one of those Lifetime movies I used to mock. What I saw that evening changed everything, though I didn't fully understand it at the time. I sat in Jennifer's car across the street from Camden's office building, feeling ridiculous and paranoid. What was I doing? Spying on my own husband like some suspicious wife in a bad television drama? I was about to start the engine and leave, chalking it up to pregnancy hormones or work stress, when the building's glass doors opened. Camden walked out, briefcase in hand, looking relaxed and casual. He wasn't rushing like someone late from a meeting. He wasn't checking his phone anxiously or looking stressed about the time. He strolled to the parking garage entrance, and moments later, my white Tesla emerged into the fading sunlight like a ghost materializing from my worst fears. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Okay," I thought, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. "Maybe he's coming home now. Maybe the meeting ended early and he forgot to text me." Except Camden didn't turn toward our apartment complex. He headed in the complete opposite direction, toward the older part of town where his mother lived. I followed him, keeping several car lengths back, my hands gripping Jennifer's steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. We drove for 20 minutes, leaving the business district with its modern office buildings and entering an older neighborhood with small apartment complexes, corner grocery stores, and the kind of places where people like Dolores had lived their entire lives. The Tesla slowed, then pulled into a parking lot I recognized with a sinking feeling in my chest. It was the building where Dolores lived, a modest complex with faded brick walls and small balconies where residents hung their laundry to dry. Camden parked in a visitor spot, got out, and walked to the building entrance with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. He pressed a buzzer and waited, checking his watch like he had a scheduled appointment. A minute later, his mother appeared at the door. She was dressed in a nice pantsuit, her hair freshly styled, carrying a purse that looked expensive. She looked nothing like someone who was struggling financially or dealing with car troubles. She looked like someone preparing for an important social engagement. What happened next made my stomach drop to my shoes. Camden handed her the keys to my car, not borrowing them for a quick errand, not checking to make sure she knew how to operate the vehicle. He actually placed them in her palm and closed her fingers around them like he was transferring ownership. She smiled broadly, stood on her toes to kiss his cheek, and then walked to the Tesla like she owned it. I watched in horrified fascination as Dolores adjusted the seat, checked the mirrors, and pulled out of the parking lot with the practiced ease of someone who'd driven that car many, many times before. She didn't hesitate. She didn't fumble with the controls or look confused by the technology. She drove away like the Tesla had always been hers, while I sat there realizing that my marriage, my trust, everything I thought I knew about my life had been built on lies. Camden watched her leave, actually waved goodbye, and then pulled out his phone, presumably calling an Uber to get himself home, where he'd lie to my face about where the car was and what his mother needed. I sat frozen in Jennifer's car for 10 minutes after he left, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. My husband had given my car, the birthday gift from my father, the symbol of his love and support for my future, to his mother. Not for an emergency, not for a day, but as part of some regular arrangement they'd established behind my back. When I finally picked up Lily from Jasmine's place, my mind was spinning with questions, and I was fighting back tears that would only confuse and upset my daughter. "Mommy okay?" Lily asked from her car seat as we drove home in Jennifer's borrowed car. At 3, she was remarkably perceptive about emotions, always sensing when something was wrong. "Mommy's just thinking about work stuff, baby," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. "Did you have fun with Aunt Jazz and the kids?" "We played Princess School," Lily announced happily, and I smiled despite everything, grateful for her innocence and the simple joy she found in playing pretend. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a detective in my own marriage. I started paying attention to patterns I'd previously ignored or explained away. The Tesla disappeared every Tuesday and Thursday, exactly when Dolores had mentioned during last Thanksgiving that she had important appointments with doctors and social services. On weekends, it was often gone for hours at a time, supposedly for car maintenance or helping Camden's co-workers, but I was beginning to understand the real story. I began checking the mileage obsessively. The car had accumulated over 800 miles in just 2 weeks. My commute to school was 8 miles round trip. Even if I'd driven it every single day, including weekends, that would only account for about 100 miles. Where were those extra 700 miles coming from? Then I found the receipts. They were stuffed in the glove compartment, crumpled like someone had wadded them up and tossed them carelessly inside, not caring about hiding the evidence anymore. Grocery stores near Dolores's apartment, a nail salon 2 blocks from her building, a restaurant she'd mentioned loving during one of her rare visits to our home, a department store where she'd apparently purchased expensive cosmetics and clothes. All the receipts were recent, all dated within the past month, all showing purchases made during hours when I was at work, trusting my husband and believing his explanations. I took pictures of everything with my phone, though I wasn't sure yet what I'd do with the evidence. Part of me wanted to confront Camden immediately, to demand answers and an explanation, but another part of me, the part that had learned to be strategic from years of dealing with difficult parents and administrators, knew I needed more than emotional outbursts. I needed irrefutable proof. The breaking point came when Aunt Beatrice stopped by unexpectedly one afternoon. I was home alone. Lily was at daycare, and I was grading papers at the kitchen table, probably looking as miserable and exhausted as I felt. Beatrice took one look at my face and knew something was seriously wrong. "What's happened?" she asked immediately, her lawyer instincts detecting trouble before I'd even spoken. I broke down. Everything poured out in a rush of words and tears. The missing car, the systematic lies, what I'd witnessed outside Dolores's apartment, the receipts, the impossible mileage, the growing realization that my husband had been deceiving me for months. Beatrice listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker and more serious with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, processing everything with the analytical mind that had made her one of the city's most respected family law attorneys. Do you have the car's registration and insurance information? She asked finally, her voice gentle but professional. I pulled the documents from our file cabinet, my hands shaking slightly as I spread them across the kitchen table. Beatrice put on her reading glasses and started examining each page carefully, her finger tracing lines of text like she was looking for something specific. Suddenly, she stopped, her finger hovering over a particular section. "Melody," she said carefully, "did you sign this insurance modification form?" I looked at where she was pointing. It was a document adding Dolores as a primary driver on the Tesla's insurance policy, listing our address as her residence for rate purposes. The signature at the bottom looked remarkably like mine, but I'd never seen this paper before in my life. "No," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I never signed that. I've never even seen this document." Beatrice pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of the forged document. "He forged your signature. That's insurance fraud. And claiming his mother lives at your address when she doesn't, that's another violation." She looked up at me with serious eyes. "Melody, this isn't just marital problems anymore. This is a legal activity that could affect your teaching license, your custody of Lily, everything you've worked for. What should I do?" I felt overwhelmed, scared of what confronting all this would mean for Lily, for my career, for the principal position I'd applied for. If this becomes public, if there's a scandal. First, we document everything. Then you need to tell your father. He has resources, connections that can help protect you and Lily through whatever comes next. "No," I said immediately. "Not yet. If I tell Daddy now, he'll explode. You know how protective he is of me, especially since Mom died. I need Camden to admit what he's done in front of my father, so there's no way he can talk his way out of it or make me look like the vindictive wife making false accusations." Beatrice studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Your father's having his annual family dinner in 3 weeks. That could work as a setting for this confrontation." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But Melody, are you prepared for what might happen? This could end your marriage. You need to think about Lily, about custody arrangements, about your financial security." I thought about Camden's easy lies, about watching him hand my car keys to his mother like I didn't matter, about the insurance fraud and the complete disregard for my feelings, and for Lily's security and future. "Maybe it should end," I said quietly. "What kind of example am I setting for Lily if I let people treat me this way?" The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. I played the role of oblivious wife perfectly, accepting Camden's excuses with smiles and nods, while quietly building my case with Beatrice's help. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything, preparing for whatever custody battle might come, and trying to figure out how to protect Lily through the storm that was approaching. Camden seemed to relax as the days passed, apparently convinced he'd gotten away with everything. He became almost cocky about his deception, his lies growing more elaborate and less careful. He stopped hiding the spare Tesla key, leaving it casually on his dresser where I could see it every morning. He took longer trips with unexplained absences, always with ready excuses I pretended to believe. 3 days before my father's dinner, I made my move. I needed to force Camden's hand, to make him admit the truth out loud so he couldn't claim later that I'd misunderstood or exaggerated what was happening. "Camden," I said over breakfast while Lily played with her cereal, completely unaware of the tension crackling between her parents. "My Honda's making terrible noises again. I need to take the Tesla to work for the next few days while I get it properly diagnosed." The color drained from his face instantly. "That's not possible right now." "Why not? It's my car." I kept my voice level, casual, even as my heart pounded. "Because—" He fumbled for words, glancing nervously at Lily. "Because my mom has important appointments this week, medical stuff. She needs reliable transportation to get to her doctor's." "She can use your car," I said calmly, continuing to butter my toast like we were discussing the weather. "My car is too small for her." His voice rose slightly, then he caught himself, glancing at Lily again. She has back problems. The Tesla's seats are better for her condition. You know how much she's suffered over the years. Camden, my father gave me that car for my birthday, not your mother's medical appointments. His face flushed red with anger and frustration. Why are you being so selfish about this? My mother is struggling. She needs help. You have options. You could ask your father for anything. She has nobody but me. I'm not being selfish for wanting to use my own car. Yes, you are. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Lily looked up, startled by the sudden noise and the tension in her father's voice. You have no idea what it's like to actually need something. Everything's been handed to you on a silver platter while my mother worked herself to the bone raising me alone. The least you could do is share what you have with someone who actually deserves it. The mask had finally slipped completely. This wasn't about borrowing the car anymore, or even about helping his mother. This was about years of resentment he'd been hiding beneath smiles and charm, about his fundamental belief that I didn't deserve what my father had given me. Saturday morning arrived with dark, heavy clouds that matched my mood perfectly. I arranged for Lily to spend the night with Jasmine, not wanting her to witness whatever was about to unfold at my father's house. Are you absolutely sure about this? Jasmine asked as I dropped Lily off, watching her run to play with Jasmine's kids in the backyard. You could still call your dad, tell him you're sick, give yourself more time to think. No, I said, watching my daughter laugh and play, so innocent and trusting. This ends today. Lily deserves better than parents who lie to each other. She deserves a mother who stands up for herself. The taxi arrived at exactly 2:00. Camden sat beside me in silence, his leg bouncing with nervous energy, checking his phone obsessively. As we turned onto my father's long, tree-lined driveway, he finally whispered, "Melody, please. We can still turn back. Give me a chance to make this right." I looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered when I'd stopped recognizing the man I'd married. You had 3 years to make things right, Camden. You chose differently every single time. And that's how we ended up in my father's entrance hall, soaking wet from the rain, facing the moment that would change everything. When my father emerged from his study with Officer Rodriguez and that manila folder full of evidence, when Dolores arrived to defend her son, when the truth finally came out in all its ugly detail, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: relief. Because sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the only way to build a life worth living for you and for the people who depend on you. 3 months later, I got the principal position. Lily and I moved into a house near my father's estate, and every morning I drive my Tesla to work, knowing that it's truly mine.